Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, I'm chatting with Joe Slack, a professional board game designer and author of a best-selling book, Board Game Designer's Guide, along with two other books on game design. He's taught game design and development at Wilfrid Laurier University and runs an online course for new game designers. Joe, welcome to the Binge.
Hey, James, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. So just as we get started, and we're just saying this off air, although the industry is huge, it's still very, very small. We've actually run into each other a couple of times before. Once, I believe, was at a developer night, I believe at Snakes and Lattes about 2 years ago. And then more recently at the Breakout Con last year, you were on the other end of the aisle down at the end. And I think at the time you were showing King of Indecision.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's really cool. And I think we see each other at A Game Cafe. That's where I played.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, tanks, but no thanks.
Tanks, but no thanks. Absolutely. Yes, that was a fun time. That's right. You actually played with us. Now I remember. That's right. You're actually on the game. Well, that's awesome. So there's a lot to unpack here, man. You've done a ton. So let's start off with the book. So you've got 3 books you've written. One's a bestseller. Tell me a little bit about this book. Well, what's this book all about?
Sure. My first book that I released a couple of years ago was the Board Game Designer's Guide. And it was really the book that I wrote. It was the book that I wanted to have read 4 years before that when I started out in game design. I just really found that I was finding things just very piecemeal, just, a blog here, a podcast there, and kind of putting it all together. And I thought, I couldn't find one resource that had like everything that I needed to kind of get started. So I said, like, why shouldn't I be the one to write that? So I put together all my knowledge and everything and put that together, and it's done very well. And since then I've written a couple other books as well.
Now this has been sold internationally. It's an international bestseller. Yep. So is it in multiple languages yet?
No, it's just in English, but yeah, it's available on Amazon and basically all the Amazon sites across the world.
And then how long did it take you to write this? I imagine, it's a journey, the learning you go through to, put a game together, design a game, even develop a game. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, because I learned something when I got your book, is that those are actually 2 different things. But how long did it take you to put this book together? What was it, like a year-long process, or?
Well, I mean, it's basically years and years of knowledge just kind of being dumped out onto the page. So I actually took a course around that time with Self-Publishing School, and the impetus was to get a book written and out within 90 days, which sounds crazy, but it's just about really putting down the steps in place to really get the ideas down, write it as quick as you possibly can without editing. That's the key thing, is not to edit as you go, because that's what slows you down. Just get everything out and then take the time to edit afterwards. It takes a little bit longer to edit, but you get the idea out and that kind of thing. So over the course of about 90 days, I put everything onto paper, got it edited, and got it out to the world. So it was just a very intense writing kind of session for that.
Now there's a certain someone that's did the forward at the beginning that goes by the name of Jamie Stegmaier. How did that come about? Like that's a pretty big endorsement for someone like that to say, I wish I had. He literally says, I wish I had this book prior to me putting my games together.
Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised and honored that he wrote the forward for the book. So it basically just came down to, I knew him through the industry. I never actually met him in person, but I know he's such a great person who does so much in the industry. And when I thought about it, I thought, how could I, better reach out to people and have people know about this book? And I thought, well, who else is really well known in the industry? And Jamie was the first person that came to mind, of course. And all I did was basically reach out to him. Like I, commented on some of his posts and things like that, and been in touch with him just a little bit, kind of here and there, just showing my appreciation for what he's done. And I just reached out to him basically and said, I've written this book, and I would love for you to have a look at it. And, if you're interested and you think that the message is good, I'd love for you to write the forward for it as well. So I sent him a copy of the book and said, take your time with it. And if you're able to, that would be cool. And he actually read it, and he said, this is pretty good content. And he said, this is the kind of stuff that I wish I had known before. And he said, I'd be glad to write a forward. And I was just so honored that he did that for me. It's just fantastic to see.
What would you say is your kind of favorite lesson in that book? What's the one thing where you say, you know what, this is kind of the the little gold nugget that everything else kind of surrounds in this book. What would you say that would be?
I'd have to say it's getting the idea to the table and doing something with it, because ideas, I mean, ideas are great. That's where everything starts, but they really are a dime a dozen. Like you can have so many different ideas, and I can have 10 different game ideas in a day, but unless I actually sit down and make a prototype and try it out and see if it works, like you're not going to go anywhere. So that's really the first thing that I say to people is to get that idea out of your head and do something with it. Turn it into something physical. It doesn't have to be a full-fledged game. It doesn't have to have 500 cards, but just put together a minimum viable prototype, try it out and see if it works. And the other thing that goes along with that as well is to not be afraid to share your idea. Because I mean, so many people, myself included, when I was first starting out, was I had an idea for a game and I don't want everybody to know, because somebody might steal this. This is a great name. This is a great game. This could be the next big seller, right? I don't want somebody to take this idea. But unless you get that idea out onto the table in front of other people and get feedback from them to make that game better, it's not going to be that great a game. It's going to be okay, but it's going to be, one person's thought or a couple people's thoughts. A game is really made in a community.
I like how in the book you say, look for inspiration everywhere, and carry a notebook with you in different places you go. And that it could be as simple, maybe as just writing that idea down. In your journal. I know I've got a journal I do that in, is if I have an idea or a mechanic or maybe some theme or story, I jot it down. It goes back in the filing cabinet. And I got stuff even I did 20 years ago of ideas. I keep coming across these things I had wrote down 20 years ago that I'll never create, but it sometimes leads you to something else. And that's kind of where the magic is, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, and it is really whatever tool that you will actually use, that's the best one, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on a notepad, whether it's, dictating, that little idea, whatever it is. Like, you don't want to lose those ideas, because if you're like me, you have a short-term memory, and, that'll be gone by the next day, unless it's just something that just keeps coming back and back to your head. So I have a long list, well over 100 ideas, and only, a few dozen of them have been even developed to the point of a prototype, but I know I can always go back to that list, and there's some really cool things there. But I also know that the most interesting one is going to be the one that comes to the forefront and I'm going to work on. And that's going to be the cool thing that I want to work on. And it's so easy to, always jump to the next big shiny thing, right? You start in a game, it's like, oh, I have this other idea. I really want to work on it. But if you keep doing that, you'll never get a game done. So you just have to get that idea, write it down, and come back to it at a later point.
That's a good point. In the book, there's also a title called Designer versus Developer. And I'll admit, I'm actually guilty of this myself. I use those words interchangeably all the time. I'm going to stop doing that now that I've read your book. But can you talk a little bit about the difference between a designer versus developer?
Sure. And it is a very common misconception. A lot of people say game designer, game developer very interchangeably. And I don't know if there's any real strict definition out there. Everybody kind of has a different idea. But the way I always envision it is, as a game designer, you're the person that has come up with the game idea. You're developing the mechanics, you're introducing the theme, you're play testing it, you're taking it from an idea into something playable. And then what the developer really does is they take that idea, that game that has been put together, and says, how can we make this better? How can we make this more cost effective? How can we make this a better product? So even, myself in developing, some of my games, I have to kind of switch those hats. And I have to say, if I'm going to do this game myself, okay, I've designed it to a certain point. Okay, now I have to look back at it and say, what is necessary and what's not. So in the game I'm working on right now, Relics of Rajavihara, I had to look at it, and I have 52 1-inch wooden blocks. And that's very costly to make. So I had to look at that and say, and ship, exactly. It adds weight to it. So I had to say, how can I pare this down to the minimum that it makes still a great experience, but it has enough components, to do everything that it needs to do. And I was able to get that down to 38 blocks, certain types, and work through all the levels to say, okay, what is actually crucial here? And what can I cut out? What really needs to be here and what's kind of superfluous. It's really kind of that distinction between the designer and developer kind of roles.
Yeah, certainly. I think from the development side, I get it, because there's been times I've created things where I'm like, oh, this would be so much fun, and I love all the intricacies of it. And then I put the other hat on, which is the actual understanding how things are made. And it's like, whoops, cool idea maybe as a one-off for my version, but practically it's not something that's going to be commercial. It's going to bring our costs way up from a commercialization standpoint. It's not really that important, that one thing I was putting in. So can anybody make a game, would you say?
I think just about anybody has at least one game idea in them. It's just a matter of actually sitting down and doing something with it. I've met so many people that, when I tell them I'm a game designer, that, oh, I had this idea for a game. And they tell me a little bit about it. And I'm like, that's really cool. Like, I'd love to, see that. And then, you talk to them again a year or two later, you're like, hey, how's that game idea? Oh, it's still in my head. I haven't kind of gone to it. So, I mean, it's just a matter of taking the initiative to take that step. I think anybody can come up with a game idea. And it may not be a great game, sure, but that's kind of where we all start is, taking a game and, making expansion, making a little change to the game, making a different theme. And that's kind of where it starts. But then after you kind of get that start and you get that, I don't know, that kind of that feeling that, taking that in and having that experience, you just want to keep making more and more games and make them better and better. So it's just that impetus to kind of get you started.
And certainly I think one way to get started would be your online course, right? You actually have a course on game design, game development. Talk to us about that. Like, what is this? Is it like an academy? Like, how do people, do I go to a building somewhere to do this, or how does this work? Is it just online, or how does it work?
Sure. Yeah. So it's called the Board Game Design course, and it's a fully online course. So you can take it from anywhere at any time. There's no restrictions. And once you join, you have lifetime access to it. So you can do it all at your own pace. So as opposed to, university that's going to be, very, very expensive to take, or, some of the other methods you can learn, what it's going to do is it takes you kind of beyond the book and gets you kind of doing a little bit more interactive stuff. So you're going to start to develop the idea for your game. And then you're going to, make the prototype for it and play test it and learn how to go about play testing and what questions to ask, and then to develop it. And then by the end, you're going to get to that point where you're going to be able to blind play test your game, which is really, putting in front of other people that haven't played your game and getting feedback from them. And then making that all important decision, which is, do I want to pitch my game to publishers, or do I want to self-publish, like go the Kickstarter route, which is a really a tough thing. And they're very, very different things, because becoming a publisher is very, very different than being a designer. They're two totally different roles.
Yeah.
So it really takes you through right from start to finish. There's over 30 lessons, just short, quick lessons, and each one is actionable. So it gets you to do something. It gets you also interacting with the Facebook group too, where there's tons of other designers in there working on their games, and you can talk about, your game, where you're at, that kind of thing. But the other cool thing, which I don't see in a lot of other courses and in a lot of other methods, is actual interaction with the instructor. So I do twice a month calls as well. So anybody that's within the course can join and ask any questions specific to the game they're working on. Because, there's cool. A lot of general knowledge and that type of thing that you can talk about, but it's only when you actually start talking about a person's game and they have, that theme or that idea they want to kind of go more in depth with, and they have questions. How would I go about doing this? And, that's where I can kind of spitball and give some different ideas and set them in a different direction, or say, have you checked out this game? This is another game that's kind of similar. You might want to have an understanding of how this game and this designer did that.
Yeah, I noticed I think you mentioned in your kind of preamble to the course, there's 31 lessons so far that people can take through audio and through video. You provide tools and resources. So if there's people that are not knowing where to start, or say, gosh, I don't know, I can't, I see all this great stuff online. How do I get started? The fact that you have the tools there to help them get started, I think is really cool. It really got me thinking about the current environment we're under right now with COVID. There's got to be a lot of either people who now have some time because they're stuck in a house that might want to start their own game. Likewise, we're getting into the summer. And one of the issues specifically here, I know in Ontario, is that a lot of the summer camps are closed. There's no real summer camps to send kids to, right? Everything is closed because of the quarantine and so forth. Could this course maybe be for some parents that maybe have kids that are, really creative and are looking to kind of nurture that skill and give them something other than sitting on an Xbox or PlayStation all summer? give them something to do to exercise their mind. Would that group work with this particular course?
Absolutely. I mean, if any parent wants to sign up and get their kid involved,
Yeah.
I mean, the lessons are right there, and it's a great activity too. And I mean, I've done some teaching in some schools as well. So I've gone into the classrooms where, you know, the teacher was, you know, learned about me and was really interested in games and getting their students to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of experience as well, working with kids and students who are developing their own game. And, you know, of course, it's a little different for an adult and a kid developing a game because,
Sure.
you know, kids, you know, maybe more used to, you know, the roll and move, and they've only played Monopoly and a couple other games.
Yep.
But it does really open up their eyes to see, you know, what kind of other games, what kind of other ideas they can have, and then how to go about doing that. Because I've seen a lot of kids, you know, take out a piece of paper and make a board and, you know, roll some dice and play around with it. But then, you know, the big question is, what do you do now? Where do you go from there? So that's really where you can learn in the course about how to play test a game, how to get feedback, how to ask questions, how to make it better, and how to, you know, take that in and with that criticism without, you know, getting defensive and that type of thing, and really taking it as a way to make your game better.
I was going to actually ask that if there's a lesson on how to take feedback, because when you make something with your own hands that's come out of your own mind, and I've been in some of these developer nights, sometimes you have to have a thick skin because somebody might give you some feedback you really don't want to hear. And so, you know, and I think that, you know, part of that challenge of that battle is being able to say, okay, separate yourself from this is my game and try to look at it as this is a game and what's the best way to improve this game. And it kind of pull yourself out of that. It's tough. Even as an adult, it's tough. I can only imagine with younger people or people who are first getting into it. Is there some lessons in there about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I talk all about that, about how to ask those questions and how to take that feedback graciously and take that criticism and know exactly what you're saying, which is to not take it personally. They're not saying that you're a bad game designer, you've designed something terrible, or you're a bad person. It's just that they're trying to make this game, trying to help you to make this game the best it can be. So definitely I talk about that a lot. And it's such an important lesson because it's so easy to just get defensive and say, well, you know, I did it for this reason or whatnot, but you have to be open to taking those ideas. And it doesn't mean that every idea that you get from somebody or suggestion is going to be something you're going to apply. And you have to kind of take that all with a grain of salt, because if, you know, you play test your game 100 times and on the 100th time, one person mentions something very tiny that nobody else has ever mentioned, maybe that's not as much of a concern. But, you know, if the first 10 play tests you do, everybody says, oh, you know, the turns take way too long, I'm bored, I'm not doing anything when it's not my turn, then you have to listen to that, obviously, because it's coming up again and again. Yeah,
the advice I sometimes give to people is that the advice is free, you know, so you're getting advice you don't have to pay for, right? So people are giving you feedback, write it down, you know, nod and say thank you and write it down. You don't necessarily have to act on it. I mean, if I acted on every single piece of advice I got on every game I ever did, I would never get those games out the door, because everyone's got, you know, almost 180-degree opposite directions they would take a particular game. Thanks but no thanks is a perfect example of that, where the core of the game was to have a dice-based roll and shoot game. And I had people saying, well, maybe we should, you know, dice are kind of old. Let's why don't you do cards instead? And took the feedback down, actually went and tried it. And then we end up going back to what the original intent was. But the important thing is to take that feedback. So now you've taken your knowledge, your vast knowledge. I know that not only have you published books, not only have you created a board game design course, but you've also published games. You've actually made games, right? So can you talk a little bit of some of the titles that you've launched? I know some of them, but I'll get you to say them. And then what a lot of people might not know, I actually didn't know until I reached out to you last week, was you actually have a Kickstarter online right now. Like right now, there's a Kickstarter running, and it's running very successfully. Just before this call, I ran the numbers: 556 backers, hit 10,000 in 4 hours, which was your goal. So congratulations on that. You got 21 days to go. You are absolutely crushing it so far on this game, and you've got a very, very strong wind in your sales. And it's a solo game, which is kind of cool too, because you don't see a lot of solo games out there. So I'm going to say the name, correct me if I'm wrong: Relic of Rajavihara.
Yes, Relics of Rajavihara.
Tell me about the other titles you have, and then I'm going to actually share my screen and let some people see your Kickstarter page while we talk about it. But so let's go through some of the titles that you've done so far.
Sure, yeah. So most of my other games I've done through other publishers up to this point. And my first one that was released was Zoo Year's Eve, and it was released last December at PAX Unplugged with XYZ Game Labs. It's a quick little bluffing game where you're trying to bluff and get your animals into the zoo. We actually changed the theme around a little bit. So it's actually, you're trying to sneak your animals into a party because they have not been invited. So it's all about bluffing and trying. It's kind of a take on the old BS game.
I got you. Okay, yeah.
And kind of adds a little bit of extra elements into that because some animals can stop other animals and you can call each other out and that kind of thing, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Another couple games that that were released earlier this year, I had Kingdom's Candy Monsters with Zemilio Entertainment, and that successfully funded on Kickstarter and is going through manufacturing right now. And King of Indecision as well, which was with Analog Game Studios, who's a Toronto publisher here, friends of mine.
McRae, yes.
Yeah, Richard, exactly. And that came out earlier this year as well on Kickstarter and funded. So it's also entering manufacturing right now. And I've got some other games that are another one that's scheduled to come out in the fall. I can't talk about quite yet, but it's a fun, fast-paced word game that's going to be coming out in a big release in the fall. And some other ones that are being looked at by publishers right now as well. But yeah, the one you have up on the screen right now is my current game I'm working on. And this is one I'm self-publishing. It's Relics of Rajavihara. It's a solo puzzly adventure game. So the way I kind of explain it is, if you picture some of those old Nintendo, like NES style puzzle games, like Legend of Zelda, Adventures of Lolo, Fire and Ice, and some mobile games that have a lot of puzzles and that kind of thing. What I really did was I saw that, I really love those types of games, but I hadn't seen one done kind of in a 3D tabletop world. So what I went about doing was trying to accomplish that, trying to make a 3D tactile puzzle game. And, the puzzle kind of came together with these like blocks and crates that you move around to try to solve the puzzles, collect the gem, defeat your nemesis, do different tasks and that type of thing. And then as I was working through mechanics, I eventually came up with the theme and pulled some different solo groups. And it was overwhelming majority really wanted to see something that was kind of like an Indiana Jones style adventure kind of game. So that's where I went with the theme and hired Tristram Rawson, who does some amazing work with graphics and illustrations, put it all together. And here we have it. So the overall game, it's a 50 level campaign game where it's kind of almost legacy style in that you open up the first box and you get these crates and you have to beat 10 consecutive levels with these crates where the difficulty level goes up and up as you're going along. And then once you get to the 10th level, you're facing off against your nemesis, Professor Montello, who's entered this temple before, and he wants to summon the spirits and take over the world. So you're trying to stop him. So you beat him on the 10th level, but then he descends to the next level. You open a new box, and then you get new block types that act differently. And you continue to do that through a series of 50 levels. But the other thing I wanted was I didn't want this to be a one and done game where you put it on the shelf once you finish the level.
Yeah, sure.
So I created the X box. So you open that at the end after you've beaten the campaign, and it introduces all new replayable challenges and some of the old levels from the game, from the campaign, that you're doing completely different challenges and have completely different obstacles. So it makes it really fresh and new. And there's over 2,000 different combinations of levels, plus a variant where you can create your own levels.
So how much time did it take you to make this game? This sounds like this would have taken forever.
Well, I've been working on it for over 2 years. It was actually at Breakout Con just two and a half years ago that I brought the first prototype with just a few levels to test out, just to see if the concept kind of held water. And
it's cool concept. I got to tell you that. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just took it from there, and then I just started developing more and more levels, and I got up to over 50 levels and decided, this has to be kind of almost that legacy style where you're opening new boxes. I think that would kind of open up the kind of the curiosity and that kind of element of, I love when I played Pandemic Legacy Season 1, where it was, you beat a mission and you get to open new things, and you're always like, well, what's in this box? What's in behind this envelope? So I kind of wanted to introduce that kind of thing. But yeah, it was over the course of a couple of years that I was doing this, and decided this was one I wanted to produce on my own and publish on my own, and got really involved in the solo groups and got their feedback and just kind of made the game better and better, and then just added on more and more elements and that kind of replayability element after the campaign. So it's been a couple of years in the making, and obviously a lot of other games on the go at the same time, and and writing books and stuff like that. So it hasn't been full time, but just kind of over the course of a couple of years, just developing it all.
I was just checking the chat group there, and Mike Bruner's asking, you're creating so many games. Are you still playing other people's games, or do you just play your own games because your library of your own games is so vast now?
Oh, absolutely. I love playing people's prototypes, and unfortunately during COVID, it's kind of slowed things down. But I've been involved in a lot of online games, game groups. Started my own game group. We've met a couple times online, and a lot of the virtual conventions. So I'm still playtesting a lot of other people's games, which I love because I'm able to give feedback to other people, and I learn from that. And sometimes you can take things away and incorporate them in other games. And yeah, I love playing published games as well. I have tons in my collection, and play with my wife, and before COVID, getting together with friends and playing games online through Tabletop Simulator and whenever I can. So yeah, I mean, obviously the last couple months I've been very focused on Relics, but yeah, I try to play some other games as much as I can too.
Tabletop Simulator seems to be the go-to for a lot of developers who are looking for quick ways to get a prototype digitally made. And maybe this is one of the learnings too for people that are saying, gosh, I don't think I can go and actually produce a physical game. There's tools out there that are inexpensive. I think Tabletop Simulator you can get for like $50, and that's a lifetime license. And there's a lot of built-in mechanics and components. It's really a lot of drag and dropping. Bit tedious, but you can develop a decent prototype for people to try. Again, virtually, if you're looking to have someone interact with you. Is that something you recommend to a lot of people to try something like a Tabletop Simulator?
Absolutely. I'd say at least give it a try. It's very inexpensive, as you said. I think it's actually only about 22 Canadian for one license. And
it's 22? Okay, there you go, yeah.
And it's always going on sale for half price, either through Humble Bundle or through its own site. I think today actually is the last day of the sale directly. And so if you're interested, go check it out now, because I think today is the last day of the sale they're having right now. But it does go on sale like at least a few times a year. But very, very inexpensive. And you can actually play other modified games. So even just for playing games, it's fantastic for doing that. And I mean, it's not quite the same experience as playing a game physically, because I find games take about 50% longer, but it is a great tool right now. And I'd say it's the best solution right now for anybody that wants to test their games. And there's a slight learning curve, but once you get the feel for it, you can get things in there pretty quickly and rapidly prototype. And the great thing is you can save a lot of time and money, because you're not having to print out another prototype, recut cards. You can just say, I want to make a modification to this card. And especially if you got some automation tools like Nandeck or Card Creator or tools like that, you can very easily make changes on the fly and implement them right there. If you need more dice, if you need more meeples, you don't have to go buy more or ask people to, borrow them. If you're at a playtesting event, just copy paste. They're like, you have everything at your disposal. So it's great that way.
Oh, that's cool. Where do you go from here? Where's the next, we're in 2020, which is a crazy year. Mm-hmm. What's 2021 look like for you? Is there another course that's going to come out on Kickstarter's next, or like, where are you expanding from here?
I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that yet. I mean, obviously I want to see how my game does, but right now my focus is on the Kickstarter, and then making sure it gets fulfilled and gets out to backers' hands by early next year, maybe even earlier, hopefully. So that's my goal kind of till the end of the year, my main thing. The other thing I'm actually doing, which is kind of cool, is I'm going to be launching a board game design virtual summit. And what that's going to be is I've compiled a list and confirmed about 18 or 19 guests right now who are some of the top experts in the field. Like I've got like Jamie Stegmaier and Gabe Barrett, Elizabeth Hargrave, Carla Kopp. I've got so many great people have already signed up for this. And we're going to be talking. We're just going to be talking about one focus thing on game design or on publishing or on Kickstarter, where they are the experts, and just have these nice interviews. It's going to span over about 6 or 7 days, have a Q&A at the end. So I'm looking to do that for about September or October. I'm just kind of finalizing the date and how much time I need to get through all the interviews and get it all set up. But that's kind of my next project. And then aside from that, just continuing to work on games. And I mean, if Relics does well, then maybe some expansions in the future. We'll have to see.
Well, certainly I want to say thank you for your contribution to the industry. I'm sure you're helping a lot of people. If somebody wants to find, so let's plug some of these links. So if someone needs to find your book, where do they go to get your book?
Sure. My book can be found either on my website, boardgamedesigncourse.com. You can sign up for my blog there. You can check out my book and my course. Everything is there as well. It's also available on Amazon, so you can check it out there as well.
Okay. And now if somebody wants to join your online design course, how do they do that?
Also through my website, so boardgamedesigncourse.com. There's a link right there at the top. You can check out the course and what's included in there, and you can sign up there, or email me if you have any questions.
And lastly, if they want to find your Kickstarter, if you're not doing enough.
I'm a busy guy, I know. Yeah, just go on Kickstarter, look for Relics of Rajavihara. It's under my company name, Crazy Like a Box. But yeah, just look for Relics of Rajavihara. It's also under the, if you look under some of the most popular games, it's actually, I think, still trending somewhere near the top, hopefully. So if you're looking up tabletop games, you'll probably find it there somewhere, hopefully close to the top there as well.
Also, if you run a search, I noticed if you just, as again, the name is, it's maybe not easy to spell. If you type in Relics and hit search, you'll get, there's like only 3 games right now that have Relics currently in the name. And it'll be one of those 3 to choose from. So it'll be easy to find it. So
yeah, and that's definitely been a learning curve for me, making sure to have very pronounceable, easy to say and easy to type name. So probably for my next game, I'll make sure that it's a little bit more straight.
That's a conversation starter. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on this show. I really appreciate it. Thank you again for your time, and all the best to you with this new campaign.
Oh, thanks so much, James. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Take care. Cheers.
Take care.